Today we're going to explore the role of nature in mindfulness practice. Now, I'm sure many of you can relate to the idea of maybe getting ready to go on vacation or talking with a coworker and describing, if you're going to the mountains or going to visit the beach or something, describing to them like, yeah, man, I can't wait to get up into the mountains and feel that fresh mountain air or be among the pine trees. Or if you're going to the beach, feeling that warm sand under your toes or taking a swim in the cool ocean water. There's something about being in nature that has an effect on us, right? And so what I want to share with you today is a little bit about, well, what is that effect? What happens for us in nature? And how can we incorporate nature into our mindfulness practice in a different kind of way? So before I get into that content, I want to just review what is mindfulness. This is a slide that's from my introduction on mindfulness that I did a couple of weeks ago. And I just want to revisit the definition of mindfulness with you. This is, if you ask 20 different people for a definition of mindfulness, you'd probably get 20 different answers. So I'm going to give you the one that I like. It's by a guy named Jon Kabat-Zinn. And he describes mindfulness as paying attention on purpose. So we bring intentionality to the moment. We're in the present moment and we're practicing mindfulness non-judgmentally. We're not criticizing ourselves. We're not judging. We're just present to what is. Now, one other piece of mindfulness practice that I think is useful and applicable is an approach that Dr. Shauna Shapiro recommends. And she recommends that we bring this element of kindness to mindfulness practice. Kindness towards ourselves, kindness towards others, and that having that element, it helps the practice of mindfulness. It makes a difference. So how can nature help us? So I wanted to share a little bit of research with you. This is a study that was conducted, I think it was in Chicago, where they looked at 98 inner city apartment buildings. And what they examined was the amount of vegetation that surrounded the buildings. And then they also looked at police reports for those neighborhoods as well. And they compared the data, and what they found was for apartment buildings that had higher rates of vegetation, there were lower total crimes, there was lower property crimes, and there was lower violent crimes. So an interesting correlation. Now, whether or not that had everything to do with it, who knows, but it's still an interesting finding. So if we go along with that idea that being in nature can make a difference, that it can maybe somehow lower our feelings of hostility or anger, there is a study that was conducted, or probably multiple studies that have been conducted in Japan on this practice of something called Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. You may have heard of this as forest bathing. So this is something that's gained popularity in the United States, but it's been going on for many years in Japan. And what they've found in their studies is that for folks that practice this on a regular basis, forest bathing, levels of hostility decrease, depression scores decrease, people report higher rates of liveliness, and folks have been able to also lower their blood pressure just by being out in nature. And so now Japan has 48 nature trails that are specifically set up for the practice of Shinrin-yoku. In Finland, the government in Finland actually recommends as part of their public health policy that people spend at least 5 hours of time in nature per month as a regular practice to stave off depression. In another study, they looked at this idea of rumination. Now, rumination is sort of like, it's a focus on negativity and focusing on negativity, which is often self-directed. Basically, the end result of rumination is that we end up not feeling very good about ourselves or about life in general. And so what they did in this study was they had a group of, I think, 40 people, and they broke these folks into two groups. They had one group take a 90-minute walk through a city environment, and they had another group take a 90-minute walk through nature. And then they brought them back and they applied a questionnaire about rumination. So they did a pre-test and a post-test. They did the same questionnaire before doing the exercise, and then they came back and took this post-test. And what they found was levels of rumination significantly decreased for those that spent time in nature versus those that took a walk in a city environment. And then lastly, if you're interested in participating in some research, there's something called the Mindfulness Project, which is a program out of the UK where you can download an app. Now, unfortunately, this is only available through iPhone. It's not available on Android. But what this app does is it randomly pings you once or twice per day, and it'll say, hey, what are you doing? Are you out grocery shopping? Are you out taking the kids to school? Are you driving? Or are you out in nature? And you can give feedback about what you're doing. And then it gives you an opportunity to rate your level of happiness. And then at the end of the year, they send you all your data back and tell you where you tend to experience happiness the most. And no surprise here, what they found was people found not just a little bit more happiness, but what they found was when people were out in nature, they tended to be a lot more happy. So there's something going on when we're out in nature that makes us a lot happier than just being indoors. Japanese researchers believe that it has to do with the activation of our senses, that when we're indoors, we tend to only activate our what we see and what we hear most of the time. But when we're out in nature, we tend to activate almost all of our sensors, and somehow that makes a difference. So how can you practice this in nature? How can you bring this to your own practice? I know a lot of us are doing a lot more walking. It's springtime here in Arizona. So we've got an opportunity for at least a month to a month and a half of some beautiful weather to continue to take advantage of, at least in the afternoons. And then we probably have to switch to the morning time when the heat comes. So the first thing I'd recommend that you do is that you tweak how you observe nature a little bit differently. So in other words, that idea of bringing your senses to the experience, not just what you're seeing, maybe not just what you're hearing, but what do you smell? What do you feel? Maybe do you feel the sense of the breeze against your skin? Bringing all of your senses to that experience. And then shifting to describing what that's like for you. If you bring a family member out on a walk with you, how might you describe certain elements of nature to that family member? And now we're going to practice this experience together in a moment. But what sort of words would you put to that experience? And then lastly, we got to get out and participate. In order to experience nature, we actually have to be out there. And so this is a great practice to share with children. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into some of the images that I want to share with you here in a moment. So this is a picture that I took yesterday on my walk. And this is a flower on, it was some type of sagebush. There's probably someone out here or someone out there that's attending this this Zoom session that knows exactly what this is, and you're welcome to share that in the chat box if you do know what it is. I don't know what it is, but it kind of reminds me, if I were to describe it to someone, I would say it sort of reminds me of something that I might see in a Dr. Seuss book. I didn't notice that there's these little critters on this flower. I didn't notice these guys until I came back and processed the photo. But these little flowers, they look like they might be little apartments for these guys. The texture of this flower reminds me of something like I might see on cotton candy. But again, this is something, if we want to share this with children, maybe if you have young children or grandchildren that you want to take on a walk with you, sitting on a park bench with them and asking them how they might describe it. What do they see in nature? Getting them, peeling them away from the TV and asking them to connect with nature and allowing ourselves to connect with nature in a different kind of way. So I want to share another image with you. And I know that one of the limitations we have to this experience together right now is that we can't really utilize all of our senses when we look at this image. But what I'd ask you to do is just observe this for a moment. And as you look at it, what sort of things, how we have to bring our imagination into this a little bit. How might you imagine if you had this dandelion sitting in your hand? How might you imagine if it might feel? What might be the texture of that dandelion? And if you want to share that, you're welcome to share that in the chat box. What might you, sorry, I'm looking at some of the chats here. Soft, making wishes, great. So what might you imagine if there was a breeze? What might that breeze feel like? So again, we have to kind of bring our imagination into the experience. Here's another one. So observe this image for a moment. Anything that you notice? Any sorts of feelings that looking at an image does it bring up for you? If you were to rub that leaf between your fingers, what might you imagine the texture of that leaf to feel like? So the challenge I'd like to invite you to try today or sometime this week. I think today the weather looks like it's going to be beautiful. Last time I was out there, we had a clear blue skies. But I'd like to invite you to get out there when you do your walk this week. Try to incorporate this concept of observation. What do you notice about what you're seeing? And I want to go back to one of our earlier Zoom sessions that Chad Myler did with Dr. Ruben Naiman. If you weren't able to watch that, that is available on our website. But Dr. Naiman talks about sleep and how we can improve sleep. And one of the things that he mentioned was we often convince ourselves that we are in these emergent situations, that we have to be moving fast all of the time. And Chad asked him, well, how do you practice slowing down in your own life? And he says he goes out hiking. And so I would invite you to, as you go out on your walks around the neighborhood, try to slow down your walk. I know that we're out there to get exercise, but maybe one of your experiences is about getting exercises, but maybe one of those that you do this week can be about sitting on a park bench, stopping to smell the flowers, literally, looking at nature in a different kind of way. And I'd be interested to see what that experience is like for you. Maybe bring someone along with you and practice describing what that might feel like for you, or have them describe what it feels like for them. And get out there and participate. And so with that, that's all I have to share with you today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I want to thank you for joining us for 15 for You today on Monday. I hope that you have a peaceful rest of your week. I hope that this was an informative session for you, and that you can get out there and start bringing some nature into your life. And again, thank you again for joining me today on Monday.